Hi everyone, today's video is going to have a little bit different format than the previous ones. Marcus Wood, who is a roaster in London, sent me an email a while back. He read Cheap Coffee, which was finished in 2019. He wanted to talk about what's been going on in the coffee market since then, in the context of the concepts in the book. There have been a lot of big changes going on since then, so I thought it was a good opportunity to discuss some of these things and share it with you all. Since this video took a conversational format, it's quite a bit longer than the ones I normally do. So that's why I've separated it into 4 parts, so you can navigate around more easily. The first one's on the possibility of threatened demand for specialty coffee now that international green prices are much higher than they were before. The second is on ways to reduce the cost of green coffee, practices that are generally employed, and Marcus's idea of how smaller specialty roasters can take advantage of the same opportunities without sacrificing farmer income. The third section is on how the behavior of different actors along the value chain have changed now that prices are a bit higher. And finally, we will briefly discuss the relevance and value of certifications today. If you enjoy this format, including voices other than my own,
Thank you for the introduction, Carl. Like you said, my name is Marcus. I work for Old Spike Roastery, and I'm the co-founder of Sanctuary Coffee in London, UK. I picked up Carl's book about a year ago, and it's kind of been my go-to, almost like a cheat sheet, just to make sure that everything is being checked off correctly. But what I've noticed is going back into a buying position after a couple of years of being out of a buying position, how much the market has changed. And one of the key takeaways that I've realised, this is one of the big things here is the backlash of COVID. So when I was buying coffee pre-COVID, I think coffee, the C market was sitting at around 99 cents per pound, and then going into buying in 2021, the C market was sitting at around $2.20, and over the last 6 months, it's been going $2.20, $2.30, 40, 50, 60, and it was getting higher and higher and higher. And what I've noticed recently is obviously from the 24th of February, the C market's taken a bit of a hit. But what I have noticed is, despite the fact that the value of coffee has been increasing almost threefold since I got into coffee buying about 6 years ago, the sales price of coffee has remained roughly the same. We'll have coffee contracts with certain customers, let's say, like certain cafes, who will be getting a free machine, and they'll be locked into a contract at £16 a kilo or something. Or you'll sell it to a supermarket, and the supermarket will want to make at least 50% margin, so you'll need to try and make around about 30% margin. Or even direct to consumers, where we're buying the coffee in, and there's this fixed price that customers essentially will pay, and to get them to pay more is a struggle, because they can go to the supermarket, and when the cost of living right now, especially in the UK, and I'm sure it is around the rest of the world, is getting higher. Bills are going up, previously fixed energy prices are now on caps. They're now rising really quickly. Pay rises aren't kind of reflecting the increased cost of living. I think what I'm seeing are consumers are facing a decision where, bills are going up, the cost of living is going up. The quality of coffee from, let's say, an 84 to an 86, if you're from a cafe's perspective, if that makes your coffee go from £16 a kilo to £20 a kilo, you'd probably rather opt for the cheaper offer. I think, like you mentioned in your book, where we see a discount, we'd all take it, right? So I think what we are unfortunately is in a position where, finally the C price is starting to grow, and it's getting higher and higher and higher, but we're still in a position where consumers will only pay a fixed amount. And what I see problematic here is this is forcing some roasters to do well, they've got a choice to make. Either they make less money or they need to lower their costs. And how do they lower their costs? Well, they're either going to purchase from kind of non-traceable means, or they're going to have to ensure that their own staff are unable to kind of face the brunt of the increased living costs. So I just kind of wanted to talk about this really, and kind of break it down and just see what people think.
Yeah, really, really big issues and a lot of nuance in there. And I guess my first reaction is that all of this kind of comes down to how things are priced, how value is determined, how from consumers to roasters and everyone else involved defines value. And I guess there are different philosophies on how prices are actually determined. And different heuristic decisions around putting prices on things. But I think this is also a really illustrative point in coffee history and in commerce history. Like you mentioned that if an 86 is significantly more expensive than an 84, everyone's going for the 84, maybe because that 2-point difference isn't worth the price difference. And I mean, that's something to lament, but it's also just a fact. Perhaps people were only ever buying the 86 to begin with because it was cheap comparatively. So if those 2 points are lost on a good portion of people who maybe bought it before because why not? Yeah, the price is almost the same, so sure. Or whatever other symbolic reason. That's what I'm seeing on my side as well. That I'm seeing the same phenomenon and thinking about this myself. And how are we going to maintain? How are we going to keep these connections together when the way people define value and define utility, and I guess this idea of trade-offs is kind of taking a different form, because as you also mentioned, everything else is becoming more expensive. In the coffee industry, we like to talk only about coffee and these supermarkets or the commodity coffee, whatever it is. But I think is also important, especially now, given the rising cost of living, to understand that specialty coffee is not only competing with commercial coffee, it's also competing for people's personal budgets. They're competing with eggs. We probably never thought of eggs as a competitor to specialty coffee, but I mean, I guess everybody runs their household a little bit differently. But I just moved from Colombia to Portugal 6 months ago, and I became a specialty coffee consumer for the first time in my life. And honestly, it was a wake-up call. My partner and I go to the supermarket, and we try to keep our weekly bill below 35 euros. And if I were to drink 250 grams of specialty coffee every week, that would be about 50% of my weekly grocery bill. And now that groceries are going up about 20-25% on average, depending on what you're buying, it's easy to see that if everything else is constant or even more expensive, that there'd be a lot of pressure to carve out that piece from somewhere else. But then, of course, on the other side, if people are consuming less of it or trading down to something else to be able to control their total bill, like a roaster working on a weighted average cost per kilo, it's their room has got to be made somewhere. So I think that's
you're exactly right. It was interesting. The other day I was in there's a shop just opposite my flat, and I went in and I noticed there was a coffee brand that they're on the precipice between specialty and commodity. They I would say they probably buy 79s and 80s, and they flux between the two. They don't really use the specialty language to speak to their customers, and I think that's to entice them in, because it's not very scary. It's very easy to understand, and I like that kind of language, and I think that works. And then you look at the price, and it was £3.20 for a 250
Wow.
gram bag of coffee. And I thought, this is really tricky to justify, because £3.20 is like that's like a low wholesale price for a cafe. If we want to give a cafe, some retail bags, that's almost 50% of what we would charge a wholesale customer. So you think there's got to be something here when like I said here, like just said, with consumers facing and shopping bills are going up by 20 to 25%. When you see a £3.20 bag of coffee on the shelf, and then you see a specialty bag for £13 next to it, it's really hard to justify picking up the specialty bag. And it's not because the specialty bag is so expensive; it's because the commodity bag is so cheap.
Yeah.
And I think this for me is my kind of concern, is that when you see people now opting for a slightly lower grade of coffee, because the higher grade of coffee is £4 per kilo more, which per espresso isn't really that much, but it's a case of what we are now seeing are cafes, and not just cafes, a lot of kind of coffee consumers opting for what's in their immediate budget. And what I think this does is that this creates this kind of reaffirms where I think specialty was getting away from quite well. I think we were showing that actually specialty is so much nicer than commodity coffee. It's worth £10 per bag. It's worth £12 per bag. But now you see, consumers being able to go into their supermarket and see a brand that looks like a specialty brand of coffee. It feels like a specialty brand. It reads like a specialty brand, but it costs a significant amount less. I think this shows that consumers want something to look nice, want something to taste nice, but they don't want to pay for it, not right now. And I think what this shouldn't do is point the finger at specialty coffee roasters or buyers or farmers for producing the wrong products. I think we're producing the right products. It tastes really good, and I think and it costs quite a lot. So what I do think though is that this should be pointing the finger at commodity roasters, because I don't understand how commodity roasters are able to get away with charging so little, unless they have such huge cash reserves. They're able to just take a hit for a couple of years. Maybe that is a situation amongst some specialty roasters. But like I sent into your I sent you an email the other day talking about what a particular roaster selling their coffee at £6 per kilo delivered to a brand that would then go on to sell it for £20+ pounds. Like these kind of numbers, I think this is where the industry will be putting the strain on coffee producers, because it's the producers that will feel the after effect for the next couple of years, for sure. It's not about the supermarkets not making enough profit. It's not about the roasters not making enough profit. It's about the demand for coffee being at a certain price point that will keep our expectations for green coffee to be, fixed at some kind of point. I think that's going to be quite damaging.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned this, and it's another thing I've been thinking about also. Just like 2 weeks ago, going to a supermarket here in Lisbon and seeing coffee on the shelf that I never really worried about this, like what is coffee, or what is Lidl's coffee like? I mean, I don't care. But it was like 10 at night, and I didn't have any coffee for the next day. So I just take a look, and yeah, the most expensive bag on the shelf in the entire supermarket, there are only like maybe 10. The most expensive one was €2.49, 250 grams. How is this possible? Yeah, of course, the specialty roasters in town that charge minimum €15 for the same quantity are complaining that people don't buy it, or think it's very expensive. And I thought, how is it even possible? But I mean, I think there's really no mystery in that. The commercial roasters are subject to the same market conditions as everyone else. Of course, there are differences about the supply chains I mean, they're not buying green off spot menus.
No.
So they're not paying for that those additional costs, the risk that the importer is taking on. Things like this, they're sending full container loads, probably in big bags or even bulk. But these are all small things. Their operation is probably a bit different. As far as like roaster size and maybe fluid beds or who knows what, but all in all, they're subject to the C market, for better or worse, just like all of the rest of us. Right now, it is what it is. There's no way around it. And if they are defying that market for the time being, my first thought would be it's because they're still hedged from before. So so they feel the same movements and shocks, just not immediately, like most of the rest of the industry does, which is, in my opinion, is one of the big problems as far as concentration of bargaining power along this entire chain. Not thinking especially about specialty roasters, but more about producers who are totally unable to hedge in any way, whereas their counterparts are basically hedged across the board and pretty much immune to these immediate fluctuations. But I would suppose that in the supermarket coffee or non-specialty coffee, if it's still the same price as it was in 2019, that's got to be ending fairly soon. And these financial instruments are only for 12 or 18 months, probably 18 maximum. And then who knows what other cuts are being made. And as I mentioned in the book, a more controversial part about the idea of creative blending and sourcing different origins, the substitution of different origins for others to be able to try to maintain price or maintain consistency, because every country is a independently fluctuating price to a certain degree, as far as differentials, which that the ability to substitute then kind of equalizes them to a large degree. But if the other shoe has to drop. But it's just a matter of waiting, because specialty roasters that are not hedging in the futures market are subject to those increased costs immediately, whereas the others have a at least 12-month runway or head start.
Yeah, no, exactly. We had spoken to a commercial roaster in the UK, and there's also another one in Sweden that I'd spoken to. But it is interesting, from a specialty perspective. I've recently signed off on a contract with a farm in Guatemala, where we would be charged $3. I think what was it, $3.28 per pound on like a nice washed, great Guatemalan coffee, and this was kind of the starting price, and then we've also signed off on a small contract for some Pacamara at $6.75, and like this kind of pricing for us, this is what the importers probably would have paid. We are collaborating with an importer to bring it over, so we're paying a small fee of 25 cents per pound to get that over to the UK. And that's just going into the existing container that they've already got going into the UK. So it's worked out quite nicely for both companies, because they needed to fill their container. We needed to get coffee over, so it's worked out quite well. Well, I'm always quite interested in hearing, speaking to these producers. I was asking, because we were after quite a significant amount of coffee, and I was asking them, sorry, how much coffee can you produce? Like how much is on your farm? And they were saying they can get about 13 containers, which is an insane, is a huge amount of coffee. And I had very mixed emotions when he told me that, because I was like, this is amazing. You must have a huge amount of land. But then I was like, oh my God, you must be worried all the time, because you've got so much coffee to sell. Yeah. And the price has just gone up. And if there are so many big companies out there with so much coffee that they've already got for the last 2 years at a slightly cheaper price, it must be really hard to try and shift this coffee. So yeah, I think why I kind of want to explore is why is it or why do you think that commercial coffee roasters are able to sign off in such volume of of cheaper coffee? I was wondering if it's a case of with commercial roasters, do they offer the opportunity for marginal gains when it comes to the coffee producers, or is it really just a case of exploitation on this huge scale? Because 13 containers is a lot. That's a lot of coffee, and that was only one farm. I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Well, I think they all obey the market. They all obey the C price. Is that an efficient market? I mean, in my personal opinion, no. But there are several mechanisms. A big one is hedging in the futures market. So you can sign a contract with a floating price that is based on a differential of the C market. So whatever the C market does, the buyer is covered if they can hedge against that. The seller would be also if they could hedge. But if they're a producer, if they're a small producer or a co-op, something, they're not going to, because just the access to financial services is quite limited or asymmetric. The other one is I used to get requests from larger roasters sometimes for an outright forward contract. So I need this coffee at $2.10 per pound. I need this many containers. I need 6 containers every 6 months for 3 years. Take it or leave it. And of course, there's no way to hedge that. You just kind of have to go for it. And if this producer you mentioned, if he has their own farm, their own supply, maybe they can do that. And as long as they're happy with the price, and even if the market price were higher, they could just go with it because they're making a profit at least, or default. That something we've been hearing about lately. But like co-ops and these kind of folks just have no way to deal with that. And this is what I've heard a lot last year, that when the prices rose, these co-ops, in order to maintain the business of some of the major buyers, have had to sign these forward contracts because that's the only way to get the business. But then what happens? So the price rises, the price is double, but the forward contract is fixed. And then all the producers in this co-op, for several reasons, such as increasing production costs, have to sell at the daily price. They're not going to take less than the daily price, that the daily commodity price, especially if they're selling specialty coffee and all their neighbors selling commercial grade coffee are earning much more than them. It really doesn't make sense. So these kind of co-ops and organizations like this are just going out of business. They're going bankrupt. And then of course on the other end of the spectrum there are strategic defaults and things like this. But yeah, basically, regardless of supply and demand of mild Arabica or specialty coffee or any sense of differentiation, pretty much everyone either obeys or is somehow influenced by the general C market as at least a floor, with differentials. But of course, these are differentials that tend to move kind of slowly. With respect to the ins and outs of harvest seasons, but one base market that's all coffee in the entire world, that does not segregate different types of coffee and different types of demand from different types of consumers at all.
Yeah, I've always hated the term forward contracts. It feels like such a trap. Even just listen to it, it sounds like a trap. So part of the kind of I started a small, more of a personal project when it comes to coffee buying, which was just to collaborate with as many roasters as I know to purchase from one farm, and we've managed to secure a really good amount so far. And I wanted to ask you, from an overall kind of trade perspective, my idea here is that I have been speaking directly with a few producers who when they are selling coffee to me, that they're asking prices at the moment between $3 and $4 per pound, and that's absolutely achievable. They would be saying the same price or roughly the same price to an importer who I would then need to buy from if I wanted to get it in the UK. It probably double, if not 3 times the price, which is where, when I'm looking at multiple offer lists every week and speaking to multiple producers who are featured on some of these offer lists, I'm seeing that the price squeeze is really coming from the current role that the importers are playing. And I'm wondering if this is becoming slightly outdated. The reason why I say this is going back to the deal I'm working with, or have worked on now and completed with San Miguel in Guatemala, in Huehuetenango. We are buying about half a container from them, and we're working with an importer who already buys from Guatemala but wasn't already buying from this particular producer. So I asked them if they had any space on the container, and they had essentially the exact amount of space that I needed. And just to utilize that service, it cost me 25 cents per pound on top of the purchasing price of the coffee. And this includes everything from warehousing it into the UK for the initial unload, storing it if we don't have the space. It includes insurance, shipping it. That's all included in the 25 cents, which is a really easy price for us to swallow. So overall, our cost price for this particular coffee is quite low. It's quite low in the sense that if I had purchased the same coffee from the same importer, it could have been significantly higher. It probably would have been at least double. And I think this is where a lot of coffee roasters are seeing a bit of a squeeze. And then we start to up our prices. We all start to tell our cafes, I know last year it was £18 per kilo, but now it's going to be 22 because we just got to, we can't be the ones bearing the brunt because we'll go out of business. Which is a tricky conversation to have, because yet again we are in a position as this part in the supply chain to essentially dictate who takes the brunt in the coffee chain. For a very long time it's been the producers, and at the moment it seems to be that the cafes are going to be the one seeing a bit of a squeeze. And you can already see how that's going to work when it gets down. So the coffee price goes up, okay, so hours are going to have to be a little bit less for the baristas. They're going to have to take less hours because all there's going to be is, where there used to be 3 baristas on a shift, it's probably going to be 2, and one of them's going to go home early. It's going to squeeze down like that, and then ultimately it's going to be the baristas who are left out of pocket when it should it cascade in such a fashion. But I can imagine it certainly would, having worked in cafes for a long time. So I think what I'm wondering is has the current role of the importer essentially expired when the cost of coffee gets to a certain threshold? Because for them to make money from us, they do need to charge a significant amount more than the value of the coffee. And I'm wondering if this is a potential barrier to us getting specialty coffee in front of the customers at a more appropriate price for them to sign off on, and therefore the kind of trade of specialty coffee is able to be achieved much more reasonably.
Well, I think what you're doing and what most of the larger roasters in the world are doing is finding that efficiency. That if you can locate this coffee and approve it and take responsibility for the quality that you're choosing to purchase, and you can have that brought to you for 25 or 28 cents per pound, and that's taking advantage of economies of scale. That's finding that efficiency, because that the importer, and if the importer is charging you that price, I mean, it does sound very low to me, so that's great. But if that's what they're charging you, then that's what they need, right? I mean, I don't think they're putting themselves into poverty.
No.
So if they're happy with that price, then that's great for everyone, because you can reduce their costs. You can reduce their risk, because if they're going to be purchasing a container from this producer in Guatemala, and they don't know who they're going to sell it to, they don't know when they're going to sell it, they don't know how it's going to hold up in the warehouse, they don't know how many months of warehouse they're going to have to pay on it, and they don't know how many hours of work of their sales team is going to take to get it sold, if at all, before it spoils. So that's an enormous risk that the importer normally has to take in order for roasters to buy spot. And if you can just delete all of that from the equation, that's an enormous savings that someone can take advantage of. Could be the roaster, could be the producer, hopefully a bit of both. So I think that's amazing. And unfortunately, it's probably not feasible for a lot of smaller roasters. Like I deal with some very small ones that want, I don't know, 2 or 3 bags, and I think, well, okay, you have them there in Colombia. I can't really send 2 bags through a dry mill because I'll lose a bag in the process, or a half bag or something. But yeah, let's wait and see who else wants some. And think, but I really wish you just had them here. Well, we could do that, but it's going to cost you a lot more. And that's going to mean a higher price for you and a lower price for the producers. And it'd be nice if we could just skip that. But of course, this takes economies of scale. If you're talking about 100 bags, then it's worth dealing with the paperwork and approving the sample and all of this and developing this relationship. But if you're talking about 2 bags, then it just probably wouldn't work.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Because I think a part of where I would then extend that is from smaller roasters working with slightly bigger roasters. So for context, Old Spike at the moment, we are currently doing between 700 and 1,000 kilos per week. So by no means we are not one of the bigger roasters in the UK. We are fairly good going. But for the 2 roasters I worked at prior to Old Spike were north of 1,500 kilos per week. It was a far more robust operation in that sense, going through a lot more coffee, about 50 to 60 tons per year. Whereas Old Spike is probably sitting around 25 to 30 tons per year. And I think when I see a smaller roaster, I just know that they probably paid £10 per kilo from an offer list, and then they're selling that at £10 per bag. And I think this is going to be a really tough slog trying to get to where the amount of money you need to grow to get. Yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be huge. But I'm curious to try and roll this out with some smaller roasters, is to suggest, look, work with us. There should be the idea is that we buy more from the producer, not that the roaster makes money from another roaster, because I don't think that's necessarily the relationship we need to have. But I do think that there is an opportunity to say, I don't know, maybe there's something we can put on like an email round or something like that to everyone, but just to say, look, we're buying from this particular farm. Anything you want, let us know. We'll try and get some samples over and all that kind of stuff. I think collaborative buying right now is one of the easiest way for us to mitigate the increase in cost. If our priority is to buy more specialty coffee, then our opportunity here is to work together and to bring more specialty coffee over to the UK, paying at a potentially higher price than they might have sold it to if working with an importer. And the importer still gets to make money from the opportunity to bring it over for us into the UK or wherever this happens. And perhaps this is an opportunity to mitigate, like I said, the current rising costs. But I always see the term rising costs when it comes to green coffee as received by roasters as a negative thing, whereas I definitely see it as a positive thing. But what I do then see is, for coffee to go up for the producers, it's going to have to go up for the importers, so it's going to have to go up for me. So I see that as that's a potential factor, that if that can be removed for, say, our key coffees, and still buy from importers from our rotational single origins, where we could only probably buy 5 bags or 10 bags or something at a time. That's not necessarily enough to bring over from directly from origin, but certainly an opportunity to work collaboratively with an importer on that.
Yeah.
I was just wondering what your thoughts are on.
Yeah, another set of interesting concepts there. I mean, collaborative buying, I think, is a great idea. If you have those contacts and are willing to do that, if you have access to importers that are willing to work at basically a flat rate basis, I mean, maybe even just leveraging their contacts if you're happy with them. If other folks don't have, you know, the contacts or the resources to develop them themselves, I mean, just taking out the inefficiency of having coffees go on the spot menus would basically do the same thing, whether you would get that same 25-cent rate or not, and that would be a matter of negotiation. But just pre-booking coffees, just you know, talking, you know, dealing with importers and or whoever you have access to, and determining how much coffee you're going to need, what coffees you're going to want, under what conditions you would take them or not take them, and ironing these things out before the coffee ships, or ideally before the harvest starts, that they can then give that same security to producers or co-ops on the other side. And that would go a long way to eliminating risk and increasing efficiency, thereby reducing costs and or increasing prices to producers. And just to skip all of that in the middle, and then the other thing you mentioned about, you know, shops getting squeezed and this being a way to mitigate the price increase. I mean, I hope so, but that also, you know, leads to another whole set of questions that, you know, how does behavior change when the price changes at each level? I mean, on the shop and consumer side, we're looking for ways to cut. Where can we cut? How can we, you know, reduce our weighted average cost? So, you know, how are we going to change blends or change qualities, or you know, is this 86 really worth it to consumers, or do we just have it because we liked it? So I think there's, you know, an adjustment going on there that may be needed. And on the producer side, I mean, I think this also has to be understood in how these two things will meet each other. Because I don't necessarily think it will be all that negative, because that 84 that used to be an 86, it might be the same producer that's making it right now. Because, you know, in the past, when prices were low, when the C price is around $1, quite a lot of the mild Arabica producers around the world are not making ends meet, are not making anything close to a living wage, and maybe not even covering their costs. So in the same world of, like, especially 2017 to 2021, where prices were exceptionally low and producers around the world suffered quite a lot, specialty was on the one hand an opportunity, an interesting opportunity for producers, but it was also just a survival strategy for a lot of them out there. And what we've been seeing now, at least in Colombia, is that now that prices for commercial grades and just like standard qualities that are coming out are highly reasonable, and people are making ends meet at those prices, a lot of folks are saying, you know what, I'm not going to do twice the work for a 5% premium like I used to. And I used to do it because I had to, because that 5% premium was, you know, how we ate. But now that I'm making over $2 a pound, maybe like $2.40 around there in Colombia, which nobody even made a year ago for high-end microlots, despite whatever they were being sold for on the other side. They're saying, no, I mean, if I'm making $2.40 for regular, you know, low 80s, that's normally coming out, and I can make $2.50 for 86-point microlots, that's just not worth it. And, you know, this is a big problem. You know, on a lot of the roasters I deal with are seeing just this other side, and that, you know, well, we paid a lot more for that. Yeah, but most of the cases, the producers were only earning a tiny bit more, and that's so it's just not worth it. So in that sense, I don't know that the producers are really losing out on that when it does come down to, like, different origins being substituted in, then we get into strange territory where differentials may be kind of leveled as demand for higher quality reduces. But that, I guess, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's a point of the kind of supply chain that I think a lot of cafes don't necessarily get exposure to. And I think this kind of this I would say is probably the responsibility of the roasters to learn more and to talk about this more when it comes to our overall pricing is the coffee that you're purchasing. We're selling. We bought it. Let's say we bought it at $3.50 or something, because for the same amount of work to get a slightly higher quality of coffee, if it's not bringing in any more money, then why do it? If your cafe was, if you had to work twice as hard to run your cafe to get the same amount of takings at the end of the day, you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't ever do it. So I think that's possibly a good opportunity for us to explain and kind of bring into the cafe and consumer's mind, is that the value isn't necessarily just at the quality of coffee. It's actually about the labor that goes into it. And I think that's a really good point to bring in.
Yeah. So I think the result is that the 86 plus microlots are going to be eventually a lot more expensive. Like right now, the markets that I deal with, there's a lot of resistance, and that's understandable, because that's the market's not willing to, they're willing to pay double but not 3 times for the same thing as we were getting last year, which is totally understandable. But and then for producers, they're saying, well, this is just not worth it. And
I hope that in the next 2 or 3 years that the new $2 benchmark that we've met with the C price becomes the minimum. And I'm wondering if, from your own experiences in the coffee chain, do you think that this is going to become the minimum? Do you imagine it's probably going to dip back down below? Because I would never have guessed that war between Russia and Ukraine would have impacted the value of coffee. So now I think what we're seeing is there are so many factors that hadn't been considered in the past that do impact the value of coffee. I'm curious to see if
yeah, I mean, I think that's just it, that I don't think there's ever been any way for anyone to predict what's going to happen in these markets. I mean, they're fairly efficient, quote unquote, in that people are taking advantage of any arbitrage opportunity that's out there. Not efficient in setting a price equivalent to the intersection of supply and demand, a different kind of efficiency. But yeah, I mean, the C market could do absolutely anything, just because it is based on so many different factors, diverse factors that are so arbitrary to the vast majority of individuals who depend on it. But I think what we will see is, based on this last couple of years of $2 coffee, or last year, and we'll see how long it goes. This is opening up options for people. So why, the question is, why have small farmers of mild Arabica coffee been producing it at a loss or well below their living wage for so many years? That coffee has failed to provide that to them. I think a lot of economists would say, well, if the price were below the cost, people would stop producing it. If the price were too low, it couldn't be too low, because if it were too low, people would just stop producing it, and they would do something else. And I guess theoretically they would, but this speaks more to the alternative opportunities for people who are currently growing coffee than the attractiveness of growing coffee. I mean, you could grow coffee because it's a good business that you want to get into, because it's more profitable than anything else you could be doing it, or you might continue to do it just because there is absolutely nothing else to be doing to earn a sustenance. I mean, these in a lot of the world, coffee is a colonial cash crop that was set up as the only thing that we want people to be doing because some overlord somewhere else said we want this place to make us coffee, and it's been that way for 200 years. So there aren't supply chains for other crops. There are not other things that people could be doing to earn a livelihood. But now that people are making ends meet and possibly even saving some money, these resources are going to open up other opportunities. People that were interested in leaving coffee but couldn't, that they're continuing to grow coffee because precisely there are no resources to be able to do something else, to be able to move to the city, to be able to go to school, to be able to plant mango or avocado trees. Maybe now they will be able to. I think there are a lot of follow-on effects that we might be waiting to see.
Yeah, I'm wondering if what would be a more I don't know, I'm not too sure if it's achievable per se, but I think it's certainly a nice idea. If actually, the specialty coffee industry worked towards giving or ensuring that the ownership of the parameters that so rapidly change the value of coffee, such as the fertilizer from Russia, such as the ability to own or dictate the value of shipping containers. If the ownership is passed on to coffee producing countries, so at least in that sense, it can happen in a more domestic fashion. I don't know what the fertilizer is made of. I don't know what that does. I know what fertilizer is, but I don't know why it comes from Russia. I saw a headline yesterday, and it bamboozled me a little bit. So I do think that working towards ownership of products or parameters that have such a diverse swinging effect in the value of coffee could be a vision or a goal that should hopefully give the value of coffee into the hands of the producers to say, look, we can do this with or without you. So, this is your price. Pay it. Don't pay it. It's up to you. And I'm wondering if this can happen across the entire coffee belt. If maybe a project could be set up to see if it works in one place, and if so, can that then be replicated? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, this comes down to sovereignty, self-sufficiency, and bargaining power. I'm talking about coffee itself. To be able to say no, to be able to walk away from a deal is power. And as long as people rely on coffee sales every week to be able to survive and do not have the opportunity to do anything else to ensure their own survival, they can't walk away from a deal, even if it's a really bad deal. And this is the essence of the bargaining power asymmetry that I believe exists today, which is, again, what I'm working on right now. That if there were these opportunities to say, you know what, I don't like this coffee price, I'm going to take my coffee and I'm going to send it somewhere else, then, too bad, because I don't care if I sell it to you or not. So I'm not going to take a price that's below what I can live on. And this is real power. But of course, when we're talking about a cash crop like this that you can't eat, there are only certain markets. It's a very efficient global market, efficient in the sense that any coffee can be substituted, basically. I mean, at the super commercial level, that people don't have this. I mean, if we talk about self-sufficiency, this goes way beyond coffee. I mean, export cash crops are probably not a source of self-sufficiency. The more land you dedicate to producing coffee, the less land you can dedicate to producing corn. So folks having the ability to switch out coffee or have half coffee and have corn or something, these kind of options that people could have would be a big help. And like you mentioned, fertilizer and different things that people need, different things that people are spending money on, to be able to have control of these and not be so dependent. One, on the coffee price. Two, on the currency value. Different, totally exogenous factors that people have no way of controlling. And the price of fertilizer, or even the price of food. So many of coffee growing communities are consuming imported food from other countries because, again, their regions were set up for one thing only, to make coffee. And so there are significant opportunities like this out there. Policy, depending on where we're talking about, at least in my experience, tends not to value these things as much as I feel it should. Prioritizing foreign exchange and different national macroeconomic factors above more human factors like consistent access to locally grown food versus lowest possible cost per calorie, because the importation of subsidized wheat from Germany or Canada or the US is cheaper. And of course, like you mentioned, fertilizer would be the same thing, just something that people are spending money on that they cannot control the price or the cost of. Maybe easier said than done. I mean, this is a pretty large capital intensive facilities. This is petroleum based fertilizers and minerals that only exist in places. But yeah, these are all really big opportunities, but of course are only able to take care of a portion of the massive risk that people are subject to, especially if they're exporting products. So the value of those products to other people in their currencies.
A lot of the commercial, especially in the UK, I'm sure it's probably different around the world, and it's probably the same in the US actually. But there's some supermarkets will have a requirement your product must be organic certified to even be entertained as a potential retailer in our store, for example.
Yeah.
So I wonder if they're what I don't know is how the spend on certification is if it's distributed, is it distributed, and if it's not distributed, why isn't it distributed in a way that can benefit the producers who would benefit from it more than a roaster or a supermarket or even the end user would. So maybe that's another thing in itself.
Yeah, I think there's some things written on that, at least regarding fair trade and maybe about organic and other ones as well. And yeah, I mean, the margins are higher for everyone along the chain, which I don't really understand why they would be, because I mean, I guess the roasters they have to purge and they have to maintain a certification, but I guess the added costs are nowhere compared to where it's actually being produced, that they have to do a lot of different things. Like I think it was for $1 difference on the store shelf for a certified coffee. Something like 20% of that would actually be redistributed to producers. So everyone along the chain is making a little bit more than they would otherwise because it's certified. Which I don't know, it is what it is. But I think a much bigger part of that is the cost of producing in a certified way versus how much of that certified production is sold as certified. I don't know about organic, but I know I remember reading for fair trade it's like 20%. So maybe the roaster and the importer and everybody has to pay their certification. They have that, but they're only moving the certified volume that they're actually moving, whereas producers are making whatever production they are as certified, and they're incurring those added costs of doing certified production and having all of those hectares certified, and only 20% of them they're actually selling with the premium. So basically take whatever premium is finding its way back to them, divide it by 5. And now you see why a lot of folks say that this isn't really worth it for us.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. It's a big part of our kind of joint communication from Old Spike to our cafes and to our end users. We're looking at kind of redeveloping how we speak to our customers and putting this as an education forward. And I think the idea of certification is it's kind of like a smokescreen, and I think it's going to be a case of seeing the wood for the trees when it comes to end users actually understanding certification is great, but it's not a guarantee. And I think this is where like price guarantees and commitments from the roasters themselves would be able to, especially those trading directly with the producers. I think that's where the opportunity for genuine price commitments will start to impact producers a lot better. I think my only concern here is that we then need to ensure that our customers are willing to pay a slightly higher price, and have the customers would then need to understand actually organic certification doesn't really mean anything necessarily. I think this is a big build-up of potential conversation that needs to have, I think this year is probably a great year to do it, because so much, it's been such a turbulent few years, I think people are just more kind of receptive to new ideas at the moment. Especially like wholesale customers. We would have giant kind of offices who would approach us to sell coffee in their office blocks and stuff, and it would always be that your coffee would need to be fair trade, it would need to be organic, it would need to be it would have to meet all these various tick boxes. And I think actually going in armed with the knowledge and the kind of the communicative tools to explain that these certifications aren't benefiting in as much as you think they are. I think that it's either going to be a case of make them benefit as much as we think they are, or scrap them because they're not benefiting, and actually realign how we source coffee to make sure that the benefit, that 20% that was going to the producer isn't lost, it's instead replenished and improved upon. Because I think really it's just this. I always feel really slimy when I see coffee bags and stuff, and like certain advertising where it's like this money goes straight to the producers, and it just feels like it doesn't feel quite right. It feels actually being able to see both sides of the curtain is a huge benefit, actually. I think, and I think it's a huge privilege to be able to see exactly what we think is going on versus what is actually going on. I think what we need to do collaboratively as the specialty industry, I think our ability to communicate to our willingness to communicate to the end user just needs to be done in a more holistic and kind of impactful manner. I think.
Yeah, but I mean, it's difficult. I mean, going back to the certifications, I think they're not perfect, and they're flawed in a lot of ways. I mean, not them themselves, but just the way the business around them is conducted, and the outcomes we can see. But I can't think of a better alternative at the moment. I mean, there are a lot of private proprietary certifications, which is a whole other issue. And a lot of folks saying, all right, no more certificates, but we're going to do our own due diligence. But of course, I mean, not everyone is facing all of these issues. I mean, if a roaster with the best of intentions is saying that we're sourcing in a way that's just as sustainable as organic and fair trade, and then even actually a little better, it's nice. But do the people that are going to these farms, how exactly are they doing this due diligence? How exactly are they setting this criteria? Based on what kind of science, or is it just like it kind of seems pretty good?
Right.
Maybe these are really complex issues, and the ecological services involved in what we're caring for and everything. So I don't know. I mean, I hope that the third party aspect can continue to exist in a way that's more efficient and allows producers to benefit at least as much as the rest of the supply chain, which again is a bargaining power issue and a business issue. Who's setting exactly how these rules work? And I would to play the other side, I would hate for us to lose all the work that has gone into understanding how these systems work, how the ecology works, and how the trading systems work, because the way that they're implemented was not as efficient as we'd like it to be. I think there's there's some things that need to change, but just like scrapping the entire thing, I think would be a real shame.
Right.
This
Yeah.
goes back to the efficiency of the whole thing. Now that I mean, producers were getting squeezed for a long time, but their voices were so soft that everything else kind of just continued on, and they're the end of the supply chain. So shops get squeezed. Maybe they'll squeeze roasters, will squeeze importers, will squeeze exporters, will squeeze producers, and then who did they squeeze? No one. So that was just that. Now, for exogenous reasons, which is also problematic, the squeeze is going back up. So now what happens? Shops are getting squeezed. So they're looking to you, and you're looking for efficiency. They're looking for efficiency. It's going to come from somewhere. Hopefully the pendulum doesn't swing back the other way toward producers again. But it probably will eventually, because again, the reason it's gone up probably has nothing to do with mild Arabica producers, and the reason it will go down again will also probably have nothing to do with them. But where do we find efficiency then if we want to keep prices at $2, which arguably will allow ends to meet for a lot of producers around the world? Where do we find the efficiency to make that possible? Do we raise prices and allow the total market for these kinds of coffees to shrink and be able to move less of them at a world scale? Where do we find the efficiency somewhere else? I don't know where it would be, and I'm not in a position to point fingers, but we do see a vast range of efficiency, a vast range of cost structures. Just myself dealing with roasters, just seeing just a really vast difference in gross profit margin necessary to keep the operation going. That it's going to hurt for a lot of people one way or another, but hopefully what we'll come up with, searching for this efficiency that allows us to maintain $2 a pound for farmers, will be better off, even if we're all a little bit smaller.